Elyce, I am so happy to see you and to talk about your new book. We might just make it, after all, My Best Friendship with Kate Spade, because I feel like we are contemporaries.
Yes.
And it brought me back to a time in my life in the 90s when I was starting out and everything was in front of me and the world seemed so exciting. So, thank you for a trip down memory lane for me as well. But really, this is a love letter to a profound and meaningful friendship. Tell me why you wanted to write this, because I know it wasn't easy.
It was very cathartic to write it. It actually took me several years to get around to writing it. I thought it would be painful to do. But after I got started, I had so much fun with it because I was starting when we first met in college when we were 18 and thinking back on all of those exciting times that we had together. And, a lot of it, we were broke most of the time and just trying to make it as college kids and then moving here to New York when, in our early 20s and having a bunch of different jobs just to pay the rent. And I think most people today have focused on how she left us and not how she lived. And I wanted to share all of those really rich stories about our best friendship together.
Well, let's talk about how it all started. You were both freshmen at the University of Kansas,
Yes.
two Midwestern girls,
Yes.
right? And I know at first you didn't think you were going to necessarily be best friends, because I guess there was a little bit of mystery about Kate. Is that
Well,
accurate?
she grew up in Kansas City, and I grew up in Sedgwick, Kansas on a farm. And so we were very different looking to each other, but it's like you can't judge a book by its cover. And she was very preppy at the time. And when I met her, I had on purple parachute pants that I just bought in New York, and I thought they were the coolest things. And she had on Ouija loafers, a polo shirt, and khaki shorts, and I kind of thought, oh, she's boring. And we were both getting ready in the mirror together to go out to the first fraternity party, and she was just funny and charming, and we were both majoring in journalism.
And we'll talk about that in a
Okay.
moment, because another place where we are totally in sync.
Right. It was a great field to go into at the time, and Mary Tyler Moore was the one who. Well, we can talk
Well, we'll
about that
talk
in a
about
minute.
Mary in a moment, Mary Richards, because I am going to bond with you over that. But Kate was very quiet, kind of, and introverted, and it took a while for you all to really form this special bond.
Yeah.
And you did so over the fact that you were both on financial aid,
Mhm.
and you didn't want each other to know about that, right? Or you
We
didn't want other people
we
to know about
didn't
that.
necessarily want everybody else to know. It wasn't
Right.
that we were ashamed of it. It's something I'm very proud of today, that I went through all of that and I paid all those off, and it's a wonderful thing that the government offers to students. But we didn't want anyone to have any preconceived notions about us at the time. And we were just starting a new chapter in our lives, and we wanted to be free of any judgment. And so we kind of bonded over that when we both went to pick up our checks that first day. And it was sort of our little secret that we kept with each other. And we had a lot of those. So we bonded over a lot of different things early on.
I know you asked her what she wanted to major in or what she was interested in. She said journalism because of Mary Tyler Moore. You said you were interested in journalism because of Mary Tyler Moore. I became interested in journalism because of Mary Tyler Moore. And I wonder how many women our age have been inspired by Mary Richards, and how winning, winsome, and wonderful — I didn't mean to be alliterative, but I just was — that she was in that show. And I think for people of our generation, and I think I'm a bit older than you are, Elyce,
Not
but
much.
I think that she presented us with so many possibilities.
Mhm.
I think the shows I grew up as a younger girl were shows like The Donna Reed Show and Father Knows Best and I Love Lucy. And even Bewitched, right? Where Samantha was it Samantha?
Yeah,
Yes.
Samantha.
Samantha was working at home when Darren was at the advertising
Mhm,
agency.
right.
Wow, these shows were really formative, obviously.
Well, try I Dream of Jeannie.
Yes.
Master.
Oh, yes. Master and Larry Hagman. Oh, my God. And Barbara Eden and that outfit. Anyway, but Mary Tyler Moore was just so different, wasn't she?
She was different. She was iconic culturally, I think, and was at the forefront of a huge movement, I think. She was confident and modern and
single,
which was the biggest thing. She
Right.
didn't have a man behind her, and she didn't want one. And
well, she wanted one, but she didn't need one.
She didn't need one to get where she wanted to go.
I mean, she wasn't opposed to it. I was rewatching some of these episodes not too long ago, and she had a date. She was dating this guy who was so good looking. He'd been a ski instructor, but he had nothing to say. He was sort of the male equivalent of a dumb blonde, I hate to say. And it was just so funny. And the show really holds up.
It really does.
Right.
It's
but
great.
So you all just bonded because, I mean, and plus she has the world's best theme song. Let's be honest.
Which is where the title of the book comes from.
Right.
Inspired by.
Yeah.
But I mean, just growing up on that made us feel like we could become Mary. And like, I think generations of women who watched that show.
So you all transferred after your sophomore year?
We went to spring break to Arizona to visit her sister our sophomore year. And her sister basically talked us into moving. We loved KU. I didn't really want to leave. But once we got out to Arizona, we were like, oh my gosh, it's warm and sunny all the time.
And maybe a bigger party school, if I recall.
It was, but that wasn't appealing to us.
No.
It might have been, but once we got out there, we realized that we had to pay out-of-state tuition, so we both had to get full-time jobs.
Oh.
And we each worked 5 days a week and went to school 2 days a week. So we weren't a part of the party scene out there, although it does have a big reputation.
I know, almost as much as where I went to school, the University of Virginia. That's used to be, it maybe still is a big party school. But what were you guys doing to support yourselves as you were going to college? Because that was a lot.
Yeah, well, at KU, we both worked at a place called Pyramid Pizza, which was owned by an alum of KU, and we were delivering pizzas. And then in Arizona, Katie worked in a men's clothing store called Carter's, and I worked as a beverage cart girl at the Biltmore Golf Course, which was the best job I ever had. I got to drive a beverage cart around 36 holes all day long and serve drinks. One of my favorite clients, Bryant Gumbel, used to play. No, do you know who he used to play golf with?
No.
Alice Cooper and Glenn Campbell.
What?
The three of them would play golf together.
Oh, my God.
And I can still remember what they ordered to drink.
That is so funny. And what did Alice Cooper look like on the golf course?
Kind of the same, just no makeup.
But that long hair.
Long hair. Always had a hat on.
I never knew Bryant hung out with Alice Cooper and Glenn Campbell. And by the way, I was such a Glenn Campbell groupie.
Me too.
And I still love listening to his songs. I mean, this is a very nostalgic interview. But I love like Gentle on My Mind. And by the time I get to Phoenix, that is so funny. I mean, honestly, you're giving me such a snapshot into my youth as well. Mm-hmm. So you guys are working, you're going to school, you graduate, and then you head to the big city, right?
Yes.
Tell us about that. And it's almost like now I'm envisioning Marlo Thomas and that girl. But tell me what it was like, going to New York City.
When I first got here, and I had been to New York a couple of times before because my sister was a ballet dancer and danced with the Joffrey School for years. And so I had a place to land when I arrived, which was great. I finally got an apartment after a few months, and that's when Katie showed up from Europe. And
she had taken a trip to Europe to sort of celebrate her graduation?
Yes, we were supposed to do it together. And I looked at my bank account and I said, Katie, I've got just enough money to either go on the trip with you or go to New York. So she went to Europe and I came to New York. And when she flew into the airport, she called me. She said, I have $5 left. I don't have any money to get back to Arizona. And I said, well, come to my apartment. You can find a job and just save up enough money until you can get home. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, maybe she'll stay. And she did, which was great.
And before we talk about Kate's first job and sort of how your career unfolded, another reason you all bonded, I know, is because you lost your sister
Yes.
when you were younger to cancer.
Yes.
And her name was Holiday.
Yes.
How did you get that name? What a sweet name.
My parents were not your typical farm. We weren't a typical farm family. They loved art, they loved music, and so all of our names are a little bit different. I got 2 family names, so mine are probably more common than the rest of my sisters, but it's Holiday, Sean, and Willow. And so my parents they're very different, and they're so fun. Like, it was a great family in which to grow up. I was really lucky.
But you hadn't really shared the loss of your sister with anyone until you met Kate. And I think there's a very moving scene where you're in your Cutlass.
Right, which is a typical Midwestern car for
Well, we had a Cutlass too. I remember that. I was so excited when my dad pulled up in the driveway. But where you shared the loss of your sister, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I hadn't really shared it with anybody outside of my family since it had happened, because I grew up in a very small town, and everybody always felt sorry for me because it happened when I was 9 years old. And for my sisters, they were a little older. But being that kid who lost their sister, and it was very tragic, it was difficult for my family for so many years.
How old was Holiday at the time?
18. And so I wanted a fresh start at KU, goes along with the financial aid. We didn't want anyone to have any, judgments about us.
I think this was a time where people did not share. They definitely didn't overshare, and they really didn't share, period, right?
Right. You just didn't share your emotions so much. And so, Katie and I started talking about it, and I shared that with her, and then she shared with me how her parents' divorce kind of, separated their family. And it was a moment that we both knew that we were going to keep each other's secrets about everything the rest of our lives. And we bonded over that. She's the most loyal person I ever met.
Meanwhile, I wanted to mention at Arizona State, you also met Andy Spade.
Yes.
Because Kate was working at a men's clothing store, right? Is that right?
Yes.
And Andy was working at that clothing store.
Yeah.
And she'd come home and say, Andy this, Andy that.
Yeah.
And it was clear that they were developing this relationship. And then you guys kind of became, I don't want to say a throuple, but a threesome. I don't want to say a threesome either.
They were dating, but they included me in everything. It was really sweet of them and thoughtful. But we all 3 hung out together all the time. They were always trying to find a guy for me. Always.
That's so cute. And so that's obviously where Kate met Andy and fell in love.
Right.
And then the 3 of you were in New York City, right?
Correct. Yeah. Andy moved up about 6 months after Katie did.
But I know that like her second day in New York, she got her dream job at Mademoiselle magazine, right?
Yes.
And I know you were a bit jealous, Elyce.
I was, because I had gone to that temp agency because my friend had told me that Condé Nast hires through temp folks from this temp agency called Career Blazers. And I'd done a bunch of different jobs for them, but I kept getting sent to marketing jobs and financial companies. And the day Katie arrives, I sent her over there. I said, at least you'll make some money, no matter what. And the first place they sent her was Mademoiselle magazine. And I was like, of course that happens to you. Of course. But I was happy for her in the end, because it's something we both wanted to do.
And so what were you doing? Because you ended up at Mademoiselle as well a little while later. But,
just for a few months.
But at first you were doing all kinds of jobs. It sounds like you were working around the clock, Elyce.
I did. So I worked a lot of different marketing jobs, and luckily in fashion. But I also had side jobs where I was working for a catering company. Andy Spade worked with me on the catering company too. But I worked at the New York Bar Association. It was a catering company called Plums. And on Wednesday nights, I would do the Bar Association, and then Saturday nights, usually Friday or Saturday nights, we would cater private parties. And It was really, it was fun. And you knew you would walk out that night and be finished with a job in 5 hours. So it was great.
But this was sort of quintessential New York in the early 90s, wasn't it?
Yes.
And you were working all these jobs, I mean, to afford to live in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
This was almost 30 years before Me Too. And let's say the men could get a little handsy, couldn't they, Elyce?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about your experiences, because I think when you read about this today, it's like, oh, good Lord, men were such pigs. And in many cases, they still are. And not all men, by the way. I'm not saying all men are pigs. But you had a lot of situations where people were really inappropriate, let's say.
Yeah. Well, there were a couple that come to mind. One at the China Club. I worked as a waitress at the China Club for a period of time. And really long hours, but people started drinking a lot, and they'd grab you around the waist, they'd grab your arm and pull you, and it was a lot.
They made you wear really a slinky outfit, and you
yes,
wore a crew neck over yours.
I did. I think that's why they didn't like me. And then, what was the other time? Oh, and I don't know if this made it in the book or not. It was originally in the book, but we hired an accountant at Kate Spade early on, and I was sort of his boss. He was a consultant to us, and I'd meet with him once a week, and we'd go over receivables and payables. And we were finishing a meeting, and I was showing him out the door, and he slapped me on the bottom right before he left. I was so in shock that I didn't say anything. I just closed the door and see you next week. And then I was telling our financial advisor about it, who is Pamela's father, Rodney Bell. And Rodney's got this Southern accent. He said, Elyce, you got to fire that guy, and you got to go on and tell him why. And I was like, okay, I'll tell him. And I told the guy why we were letting him go. He got mad and told me he was just being friendly and stormed out of the room. But that's kind of the way things were.
Right.
And you just tolerated it, and you moved on. And you skirted around things, and you just kept going, because there wasn't a whole lot women could do about it. If you mentioned it, you might get let go from a job.
Right. You kind of just had to put up with it.
Yeah, because usually those people were your boss.
You all started Kate Spade how many years after you got to New York? What year was it?
We started it in 1993.
1993. So you hadn't been in New York that long.
No.
Kate had been promoted to fashion
editor, yes.
Fashion editor
Yes.
at Mademoiselle, which
Yes.
was a really big job for someone her age.
Mm-hmm.
And tell me about the genesis of the company and how the two of you got together and decided to embark on this adventure.
We had always wanted to have a business together when we were in college, and we couldn't quite pinpoint what that might be. I mean, we'd only waited tables and been bartenders before, so we needed some experience. And it was really Andy Spade's idea to start a handbag company, because Katie knew what was missing in the market for handbags. So the two of them cooked up the idea of the handbag company and called me and said, are you game to do this? And I was still working at a job I loved for Girbaud Jeans at the time. I was flying all over the world. It was amazing. I loved my job. And so I was like, okay, I'll join you in a year. And in the meantime, we met our third partner, Pamela Bell, who, jumped in immediately and started working on product development, production. So that's really how it started. It was Andy Spade's idea, and Katie and he started it together.
And why handbags?
She was an accessories editor, and so she would go out into the market for scarves, jewelry, gloves, hats, and handbags. And I think there was always something missing that she was looking for the different photo shoots that were happening. There were, European bags with a lot of hardware and beautiful leathers. And then there were super simple bags like a canvas tote from LL Bean. But there wasn't sort of that in-between where it was simple and chic and cool and American. And that was really her idea. And she started on the floor in her dining room. I remember taping cut out craft paper together to create the shapes she wanted. I mean, neither one of us could sketch or design anything. And that's how it started. And she found a pattern maker and then a sample maker after that.
And what was unique about these bags? What made them take off as they did, do you think, looking back on it?
I think it was timing, and I think they were something new and different that really hadn't been out there before.
And as you said, Elyce, kind of a medium price point, right?
Yes. So they were designer, but they were accessible to people. So I think for young women just starting out in their careers, it was the first big designer purchase they'd ever made. And it wasn't just that it was a designer bag. It was a time in their lives when they had arrived. And I know for Katie and me, when we finally made enough money where we could go out and buy something special for ourselves, it made you feel like you'd made it. And there is a special feeling to that. So those pieces that women come up to me at events these days and say, I still have my first Kate Spade bag. And she bought that maybe when she was 20, 25, 30. And it's still sitting in her closet because it reminds her of what she treated herself, something that she treated herself with.
And also, I think it meant independence, right?
Yes,
in a
exactly.
way, like Mary.
Yeah.
Mary Richards, that somebody was successful on their own and they could then buy a pretty designer bag. But also, Elyce, it was practical. I know you all designed it so a lot could fit in there, right? Even though it wasn't huge. It was...
they had to be functional.
Functional, exactly. And then you tell the story about the label and the idea of the label, which again made it even more unique.
Yeah,
tell us about that.
Well, originally we had the labels sewn inside the bags. And right before a show, Katie and Pamela and I were standing there, and Katie said, she was standing back and looking at all the bags, and she said, it's missing something. You need somewhere for the eye to go. And she had one of the labels. They were men's shirting labels that we had made up. And she put one right in the center, about an inch down, and she said, that's what it needs. And it really, that one thing, I think, turned a handbag company into a brand.
Isn't that fascinating, too? I mean, because even if the purse was special, unique, practical, functional, etc., it needed that extra touch of this is a Kate Spade bag. It's funny to me because I hate labels. I hate bags that scream labels. But in this case, I think it was subtle enough.
It was all lowercase, except for the New York on the bottom. That was in uppercase. And that was Andy Spade's whole idea, to make it lowercase. Like, don't go big on labels because that's not the important thing. The important thing is the bag itself.
But let people know who made it.
Who made it. Right,
yeah.
Exactly.
The brand expanded. Talk about how it grew and how successful you all became very quickly.
Yes, well, it happened fast. Unlike most companies, they take years to build up. We started with handbags and really expanded on our handbag line, making small leather goods, wallets, cosmetic bags, etc. And we manufactured and sold all of those ourselves. At that point, we had a lot of companies coming to us to license products who, they'll manufacture, they're really good at something. So we picked partners who were excellent at what they did. Our first one was stationery because we all wrote personal notes back then. And Katie really had a fondness for stationery. I do too. And so we picked a stationery partner and we would design all of the pieces, but they would manufacture and sell it and inventory it. The next thing was shoes. Then, the floodgates opened, and we had tabletop, we had bedding, we had fragrance, we had McLaren strollers because we had a baby bag at one point,
right,
which was my partner Pamela's idea, to make a baby bag out of one of our plain totes. Because I don't know about you, but none of us could find really chic baby bags when we were first having children. And It was the coolest bag. You could carry all of your own things in there as well as everything for the baby.
I don't think I cared about having a chic baby bag, but maybe I'm unusual that way.
Then you never shopped for one because they were hideous. They were either pink or light blue. And they had unicorns and rainbows and all of that stuff on them. So you couldn't really find a cool one. Today, there have lots of choices.
Meanwhile, you all got an award at the CFDA, the Council on Fashion Designers of America.
Yes.
I guess in the mid-90s, right?
Yes. And that was really exciting. It's what put us on the map, and really we saw the turning point of our business.
You all didn't realize at the time that people aren't really recognized for years and maybe even decades. And here you are, like just a few years into the business.
3 years into business, and we were winning this. And it was really surreal, like showing up to that award ceremony with all of the fashion people. It was Donna Karan and Michael Kors and, Marc Jacobs, everybody huge. And here we are walking on the red carpet feeling like we're going to get yanked, like we're imposters. But it was really a surreal moment. It was, you kind of felt like you were in a dream. And the really great thing about that event, but also terrifying, was that Princess Di was honoring Liz Tilberis at that event.
And we should remind people who might not remember, Liz was the editor of Harper's Bazaar.
Yes.
Who sadly, tragically, was diagnosed with ovarian cancer and then died of the disease.
Yes. But she was still living then, and they were giving her an achievement award.
That's wonderful.
And it was a really
and
special
to have Princess
tribute.
Diana there.
I know. Can you imagine?
Did you meet her?
I didn't, but Katie did.
She did?
Yeah.
All right. I have to ask you about, so it's Elyce and Katie and Elyce. And the brand is called Kate Spade, not Elyce Arons. Did that piss you off at all?
No. Katie and Andy really came up with the idea for the brand. So it's her first name, his last name, and we loved the name. I loved it. It was great. We all really did a lot of everything when we first started out. And I felt really lucky to be part of it.
And by the way, Katie didn't want to be the name of the brand, right? When I guess Andy came up with that idea to call it Kate Spade, which I'm assuming he did.
And we were all fine until the CFDA award. And then, because that is the designer, which she was, so it becomes less about 4 people who are running the brand and more about the person who is designing the brand. And that's really when that happened.
And didn't she say, "Don't expect me to be Kate Spade"?
She did. But she became really good at it. She was so shy about speaking in public.
I'm sure I interviewed her on the Today Show.
I'm sure
back
you
then.
did. Yeah, I'm sure
I
you
should
did.
dig that up.
Yes, that would be great.
Yeah.
That would be great.
And so obviously the brand is doing really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
It's surreal, as you said, beyond your wildest expectations. So then you all take a break to raise your kids. So what is happening with the brand as you all are raising your family?
So, we owned it for 13 years.
That's right. You sold it to Neiman Marcus.
We sold it to Neiman Marcus after 13 years of owning it and growing it, and it was just such a whirlwind of excitement and fun. And after that time, we sold it lock, stock, and barrel. We stayed on for 6 months to help with the transition and for them to run the business. And we ended up taking a trip, the 4 of us with our families, because we all had small kids, to Cabo San Lucas. And it's a place that doesn't exist anymore called the Twin Dolphin. It was such a special resort, kind of a glamorous time from the old Hollywood days, but it was still so beautiful. And we just had such a great trip together, but it was also a little bittersweet towards the end because we knew that it was the end of our business partnership at the same time. Our friendship would always remain. But that's how we celebrated with the trip together.
You named your daughter after Kate.
Yes.
And
my oldest daughter is Katie.
Katie Holiday, right?
Yes.
And you write about a really moving moment when Katie, your friend, meets Katie, your daughter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Katie and Andy Spade are godparents to my daughter, Katie. And when they came to the hospital to visit, they didn't really know what we were naming her yet. And Katie was holding her, and I said, her name's going to be Katie Holiday. She just got so choked up. It was the sweetest thing in the whole world. It's really a wonderful moment.
So you all remain very close friends, even though you're no longer business partners.
Mm-hmm.
And then you decide to jump in the fashion fray again, right? So tell me about sort of how Frances Valentine was born.
So we had been out of the business about 8 years and had, you know, completely different experiences than we'd had in our careers. We were moms. We both volunteered at school, and we would meet often because we didn't really know what to do with ourselves. I hadn't not worked ever before in my life, so it took me some time to adjust. But with volunteering at the school, once you volunteer, they start to suck you in. And so I was PA president for many years and then became board chair at the school. And we were happened to be building a high school at our school at that point. So I learned so much, and it was really, really rewarding. But we both missed fashion so much. So Katie and I started talking about getting together again and getting Andy and Pamela back, but they had both started their own businesses and were really happy with what they were doing. So they knew how much we enjoyed working together. So Katie and I started talking about an accessories business. So we started with handbags and shoes. And
what year was this?
We started in 2014, and then we launched it in 2016. And Katie's love is really accessories. She loved handbags. She loved shoes. And we had a lot to learn. You think you know everything. And
right.
Then
and I'm
of a
sure
sudden,
a lot of things had changed,
everything
too.
had changed. E-commerce had taken over from wholesale and retail. And influencers had taken over from editors. And social media didn't exist when we sold Kate Spade. So we had a lot to learn. And, we were up for the challenge. We were, just taking off. And that's when we lost Katie in 2018, which was, devastating.
Katie took her own life, I know. And I know there are a lot of things about this that you don't want to discuss, Elyce, and I want to totally respect that. But I'm also curious about sort of, if you saw evidence of her being depressed through the years. Here you two were so close, and yet there was a side of her that you didn't really know or understand, or that she kept so guarded. Can you talk about that, if you saw?
Well, I knew it because we discussed it often, and it was really in the later years. And she was getting help for it. But I never, ever thought she would take that tragic step.
And did she ever, so she never talked about thinking about ending her life or anything like that? She would just talk about this dark cloud that she experienced.
Yeah. And she never really called it depression. It was always, I get sad. And I get blue myself sometimes, but I've never had depression.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that feels like. And
I don't know. I mean, I think there are different levels of depression too.
I'm sure.
I think people talk more about this than they used to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's hard to label it, but I remember when my husband was diagnosed with colon cancer, I had what was termed situational depression.
Mm-hmm.
Where something happened and, just a traumatic life event. And I became understandably, really depressed and had a lot of the symptoms of full-blown depression. I couldn't sleep. I had, physical pain, so.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, no. I mean, I think a lot of people experience depression, and you say you're not depressed, you sometimes get sad, but who knows, right? And it's a chemical imbalance. And I sometimes just thinking about this now about Katie is, I just wonder, I know, in midlife, your hormones fluctuate. Mm-hmm. Estrogen actually is responsible for, it's a mood elevator.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if, somehow that had something to do with it. And I think, we're talking about it much more about perimenopause and menopause, but I think there are real chemical changes that
Absolutely.
women go through that perhaps exacerbated her
Mhm.
situation as she got older.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think that's probably true.
You know,
Yeah.
um, I think you write about it so beautifully, but it is something that you have really had to process and adjust to, understanding why and losing someone to whom you were so, so close.
Yeah.
Um, how have you been able to do that? Because I think probably people listening to this or watching it many people have had similar experiences of loss. I think this is probably not typical, but I would imagine people who have someone close to them who take their own lives it's a very specific kind of grief, compounded by a lot of questions and confusion, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure. And there really is no why. There is no why. I think people who have lost someone in this way, we search ourselves constantly. But as you said, it's a chemical imbalance, and you just can't know how it's going to manifest itself. I have taken solace and comfort in work, and it's with the company Francis Valentine that we started together, and just knowing we did that together has really helped me. And I think work kind of always gets you through a lot of hard times, and I've been able to get through a lot because of that. And then going back and writing the book and talking about all the fun times we had together and focusing on the joy she brought to so many people and her life has been really healing for me personally.
I'm sure. I was wondering if you could read the epilogue because it's so beautiful and I think it captures, what I was talking about, sort of the confusion and the searching for answers, and also I think probably a little of the guilt that people feel.
We all have dark moments and periods. In one of those moments, she lost hope. Like many people who have passed in that shocking way, taking their loved ones by surprise, Katie left us with many questions. We've had to learn to cope with our grief, and after 7 years of trying to comprehend her actions, I'm still peering into the well and not finding answers. All of us who loved her have had to find a way to make peace with her incomprehensible choice. It's not been easy.
The epilogue, I think, really captures this loss and grief that you continue to feel. And I'm curious, Elyce, how hard that was to write. I know that writing about your happier times were really cathartic and fun and must have given you, as you said, great solace. But writing about how you got the news of your best friend's death and then being left with such confusion and grief must have been unfathomable. And what was it like writing this?
The epilogue was the most difficult part to write. And it was because in all previous chapters, I'm focusing on happier times and building two businesses together, etc. And the epilogue's really, I think, what a lot of people want to know, and it's not what the book is about. But I feel like I have to say it and I have to talk about it because I don't want to stigmatize depression, and yet at the same time, I want to be protective of Katie's privacy and her family's privacy. So I don't cover it a lot in the book at all, and I want to be respectful of her family.
And as you said, you really want to focus on her life.
Yes.
Not her death.
Yes. I mean, she just brought so much joy to so many people. she was shy, but she was the funniest person. And anyone who met her will tell you that she's one of the funniest people they've ever met. Because she wasn't shy in small groups. She had tons of friends. But really, her shyness came about when she had to get up in front of large groups of people and talk. And there's so many funny stories about that aren't even in the book. But
Are you still close to her family?
yes.
And how do they feel about the book? Are they happy you wrote it?
I think if Katie and I had decided to write a book together, it would probably never would have happened, because we'd say, "Oh yeah, let's do it," and then we'd never do it. And if anyone of my partners or her family wants to write a book, I think they would all have a different perspective, because I was with Katie from the time we were 18 years old through adulthood. It was a very special time and huge milestones in our lives. And everyone else knew Katie at different times in her life. And so, and had different experiences with her. So I think their books would be different than this one. All probably great at the same time.
And I know when I said this is sort of a sad book, you said it's not.
It's not. It's really focusing on and celebrating her life and celebrating a best friendship. There are so many wonderful stories in there from the time we met until, we sold our first business, Spade, and then I talk a little bit about our second business, Frances Valentine, in there as well.
And by the way, I just want to mention, if anybody's watching this, I'm wearing Frances Valentine shoes.
Katie has
a Frances Valentine dress, which I bought a couple of summers ago at your Sag Harbor store.
Thank you.
And when I got up this morning, I said, "Oh my goodness, I'm interviewing Elyce. I have to wear Frances Valentine."
Well, thank you so much.
And I love it, and it's so comfortable.
It's great. It's all about feeling really good and being joyful in what you have on and feeling confident.
And also, I think it's very classic and tailored, and I think probably a lot like Katy Brosnahan was when you first met her.
Right, exactly. We really use vintage pieces as our inspiration, and Mary Tyler Moore is one of those who inspires me.
Here we go again.
I know.
We're going to break out into the theme song before this is over.
I have something else to tell you that you're going to freak out. So we use vintage inspiration for our pieces, and they're not trendy at all. So I hope you have that dress in your closet for the next 10 years, the next 20 years. And I hope to have this piece in my closet that long. But they're pieces that I want people to pull out of their closet and just say, "I love this, and I can wear this to anything, and I can wear this today or 10 years from now."
Which is so great in this era of fast, disposable fashion.
Right.
To have
and
something,
trends. Yeah.
right, that
Yeah.
is that can see you through the years.
Yeah.
I'm all for that.
Me too.
I wish I ascribed to that philosophy a little more than I do, but I think you're so right. And
we all
by
get
the way,
tempted.
fast fashion is so bad for the environment.
I know. Well, one of the things that Katie used to say was, if you're never on trend, you're never off trend. So following trends can be slippery, and a year from now you might say, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I bought that."
Or this is so 2019.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. All right, let me tell you the Mary Tyler Moore story. So a couple months ago, we got a call at Frances Valentine from the Mary Tyler Moore Foundation. We have a Zoom with them. They're telling us all about the foundation and how Mary and her husband, Dr. Robert Levine, had raised $2 billion for diabetes and retinal research.
Right. And $2 billion?
Billion.
Yes. And Mary, of course, Mary Tyler Moore had diabetes.
Yes, and lost her sight later in life.
Right.
And so she and her husband had raised all this money, and the foundation was looking for ways sort of to expand, an understanding and,
Increase awareness.
Awareness of their foundation. And they said, "We've been watching your brand for a couple of years, and it just feels so much like Mary Tyler Moore." I start vibrating on the Zoom, and I was like, I met her, and she came to the Kate Spade office, and then I'm writing a book, and the name of the book was inspired by the theme song to the, and they said, no, we didn't know any of this. And I said, have you not heard me talk on podcasts or anything about how Mary Tyler Moore's such an icon? And so we are working on a collaboration with them right now.
Oh, how
And
fun.
I know. It's really exciting. I don't have more news to share than that, but we're working on several things with them, which I'm so excited about.
Well, I'm so excited about it too, because seriously, when I watch the show, even today, I look at her clothes and think, I want that outfit.
So
and
cool.
It still looks so great and it's timeless.
Well, Dr. Levine invited me to come to their house in Greenwich before they moved. He moved. And he let me try on her clothes. And I know. It was one of those things like you have to knock on to make sure you're still.
And what are they going to do with all of her clothes?
Well, I think some of them will go to certain museums.
I was going to say
etc.
they should be in the Smithsonian.
Right, I know. Amazing.
But you are now getting inspiration, and that will present itself in this collaboration.
Yes, and I can talk about it later.
Oh,
it's
good.
Really exciting.
Well, you have to let me know when these things are available, so I can come and purchase some of those items.
Okay.
Well, Elyce, thank you so much. This was so fun talking to you.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm so happy that we've gotten to know Katie, Katie Spade, through this book. And as you said, about her incredible success and your incredible success and your joyful lives together. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.